The Heysel Stadium on the outskirts of the Belgian capital was completely rebuilt after the disaster, but the layout has remained the same, with a track around the pitch and the same gate next to Block Z, where 39 people died, all recognisable to those coming back, like marketing man Keith Cooper.
In 1985 I was working for the company ISL, sports marketing company, and we were responsible at that time for all the sponsorship in and around, amongst other things, the European Cup Finals, which at that time still meant primarily, in sponsorship terms, the installation of the advertising boards around the pitch, to make sure with my colleagues that these boards were in place for the maximum exposure on television during the game.
Guy van Biesen was the head of the stadium workers.
We were obviously very concerned to make sure all aspects of the stadium, the pitch, the lines, the loudspeakers and the PA system were in perfect condition. Especially since the game was going to be televised across Europe, possibly even worldwide.
Marcel Roosens was responsible for the VIPs.
I've seen the king here, I've seen princes, ministers and mayors. It was my job to welcome them and to give them a little card with their VIP seat number and to show them to their seat.
At 11 o'clock, the organisers of the final were invited to a reception in Brussels Town Hall, followed by lunch in a nearby restaurant. Marketing man Keith Cooper joined them there, feeling slightly uneasy about what he'd seen in the stadium.
Well, we worked in the stadium during the morning, and I came back to the reception in the town centre for midday. It was normal on a European Cup Final day for all the bigwigs from UEFA, from the local organising committee, from the city and so on to be here. Most of those gentlemen had no professional responsibilities on the day. Some of them did, of course, but most of them were here for the game, as is their right. So it was a pleasant social occasion. Everything was looking good, although it was during this reception that I began to express certain concerns about what might happen. During the course of our work, we noticed that there was a lot of loose stones and loose rubble lying around. So I brought along one of these stones, you know, about the size of a cricket ball, rough, jagged edges, and it seemed to me a little bit negligent that greater care had not been taken in the preparation of the stadium to make sure that that kind of stuff was not lying around.
It was midday. Alessandro Antonini and his friend Fausto Moschini were looking forward to the final. It was beautiful sunny weather, and with their wives they were enjoying a wander around the centre of town.
Fausto and I had been away together before, but that was the first time we'd been to a football match together. He really wasn't as much of a Juventus fan as I was. I tried to make him understand that it's one thing to watch a game on television.
Terry Wilson always claimed he simply reacted to Italian aggression towards Liverpool supporters inside Block Z. 20 years later, he stands by that story.
No one wanted any trouble, so it was great. And then as we were in there singing and that, our attention was being drawn to things that were happening in Z section.
Was a young lad wearing a Liverpool shirt. He was between, 8 and 12 years old, and he was just getting destroyed by Italian men.
We did get pretty angry from the point of what's going on, who are these people fighting here, why are they fighting? So the reaction, our immediate reaction, was pull the fence down, get over there to the assistance of our supporters.
So it was one of them. Either we stay there and let the Italians, really batter the Liverpool fans, or go over there, try and help them do something about it.
Several waves of Liverpool fans chased the Juventus fans in Block Z. Some ran onto the far end of their terrace, others escaped onto the track around the pitch. The gendarmes fled with them. A day of celebrations was fast unravelling. In their panic, a big number of Italians had run towards the farthest lower corner of Block Z, where they packed up against a wall and started trampling on each other. Armando, Danilo, Guido and Domenico were in the thick of it. The danger of the situation was just starting to dawn on them.
After just a couple of minutes, I felt my trainers slip off, sucked right off my feet. I realized I was barefoot. My feet weren't even touching the ground.
Your shoes don't just come off for no reason. We were packed in so tightly together, like sardines, you couldn't move a muscle. That's how it was. You didn't even have the time to think.
You don't think about anything in that situation. I couldn't think about anything. You just think everyone's going to spread out soon and everything will get back to normal.
7:30, 3/4 of an hour before the scheduled kick-off time. Back in Italy, Mrs. Martelli, a school teacher, was attending a meeting about the end-of-year exams.
All of a sudden, at about 7:30, something came over me. I couldn't breathe. And yet the window was open. There was plenty of fresh air. But I didn't feel well. So I got up. My colleague behind me grabbed my jacket and said, "What are you doing, Martelli? The principal is still speaking."
Social worker Martine Bolu was on standby duty at the fire brigade headquarters when the unexpected news came in. She wrote a diary about the night as a kind of therapy, and she told us that until now she'd never reread it.
At 7:30, no one rushed to answer the phone. We were used to hearing it ring around the clock for all sorts of reasons, depending on who was calling. Finally, Chris got up, not out of a particular desire, but simply because she was the person sitting closest to the door. And unexpectedly she screams. She repeats herself once, twice, 3 times. She says, but that's impossible. We all say the same thing. It must be a joke. We ask if she's sure. See for yourselves, she says. Just turn on the radio, the television.
7:31 and 20 seconds is when the emergency service radio first reported that a wall had collapsed. A man with a yellow shirt frantically tries to help. He's a Liverpool fan. He wouldn't be interviewed because the memories are too painful. Contrary to what was assumed that night, and what is often still assumed, it wasn't the collapse of the wall that caused the 39 deaths. The collapse actually released pressure and allowed fans trapped up against the wall to escape. The dead died from suffocation. They lost their balance in the pushing and shoving, fell, and were trampled by the others.
Just human beings just come over like water, unbroken, and thuds, just thuds. They made a noise, but you know, it's just a quiet noise, but the screaming.
Seconds seemed like hours, while the disorganized police and gendarmerie struggled to intervene in any coherent way.
I held my wife's hand as long as I could, and then at a certain point I realized I wasn't holding it anymore, and I was lying on the ground.
I was stuck under there for 3, 4, 5, 10 minutes. I couldn't tell you exactly, because the minutes felt like an eternity. I couldn't see, I couldn't breathe. I'd lost my glasses, so my vision was blurred, and I couldn't really see anything. In those moments, many things passed through my mind. The only thing I remember thinking was, I've come to Brussels to die for the sake of a football match.
50 meters from Block Z, in a VIP hall, a reception was underway. Marcel Roosens and his VIPs were totally unaware of what was happening.
A couple of minutes before the game was due to start, a whole group of guests from the European Union still hadn't arrived. But everything seemed fairly normal, although of course it was very noisy outside. At a certain point I went out, wondering whether these EU people would ever turn up. I saw 3 or 4 cars arrive. I thought, there they are. But they had barely pulled up when they left again. I couldn't understand what was happening. And just then, people started to come running down the stairs, from the grandstand into this hall, people I didn't recognize. They were fleeing from Block Z.
The chaos on the terraces was spreading. Fans from Block Z burst into the VIP hall. The Italian minister Gianni De Michelis saw it happening.
I remember we drove in. Everything seemed normal. The car stopped right in front of the entrance to the VIP hall. I got out. Suddenly, a crowd of people came running towards me. They stopped me, shouting, "Minister, help us." It was just awful. There were a lot of traumatized, and some covered in blood.
All evening it was as though I was someone else watching myself. I felt like I was watching a disaster movie.
At the time I was Vice President of the European Commission. I was invited to the European Cup Final, and I in turn had invited Henry Kissinger, the former American Secretary of State. I immediately phoned him from my car to say, "Listen, there's going to be a delay. You should wait in the hotel until I phone you again."
Etienne d'Avignon was the owner of one of the very first mobile phones, a car phone. In the stadium, just a few fixed telephone lines were available. On top of this, the police and the gendarmerie radios weren't working properly. The lack of communication added to the confusion.
A few minutes afterwards, some police officers came and told my father that there were already people dead in Block Z. And so the 2 of them went straight to Block Z to see what was happening.
The mayor was standing next to me, and I was thinking, what's going to happen now? What are we going to do? If the Italians learn what's happened, how will they react, and what will the English do then? We had to make sure that people stayed where they were. I'm not sure, but I think the mayor said at that point that we'd have to cancel the whole event.
A group of gendarmes managed to push the English fans back out of Block Z. Their orders came from outside the grounds. There was no command centre inside the stadium. In the meantime, many of the Italian fans behind them still struggled to escape.